Hi, I am so thrilled that you signed up to receive the behind the scenes look at how I'm pulling together my newest creation, my podcast called OTs and Pelvic Health. For those of you who are new to me, my name is Lindsay Vestal and I own The Functional Pelvis, which was the first OT-run pelvic floor therapy practice based in New York City. I've been an OT since 2012, and my passion is teaching other OTs how to become kick-ass pelvic floor therapists themselves. Since 2018, I've offered online training through my flagship course, OT Pioneers, and literally hundreds of OTs have taken this course and have gone on to become pelvic floor therapists. So here's how this behind the podcast scenes series is going to work. I've created 3 different videos for which I'm going to spread out over 3 days. Today is the first video, and in today's video, we're going to talk all about the why and the who of the podcast. Why am I undertaking this, and what are the things you should consider if you're interested in starting one? Tomorrow, you'll receive a video from me on how, the equipment I'm using, the editing process, etc. Then, the day after tomorrow, you'll receive my last video, which is going to go into how to develop the unshakable confidence to tackle any big project you may have. I know I needed that to tackle starting a podcast. Sound good? All right, let's jump in to today's content. Why am I creating a podcast? And how did I decide who this podcast is for? If you're thinking about starting a podcast, you want to have a crystal clear clarity on what the purpose of your podcast is. This is starting with the end in mind. Who is your podcast for? Why should they listen? And what do you, as the host, hope to achieve with the podcast? In addition, what do you hope to achieve with the podcast that, quite frankly, can't be achieved with any other medium? Now, these questions can at first seem overly broad, right? But the more specific you can get on answering these questions, the better. Because then you'll be creating the podcast with a single person in mind. This is so important to ensure the content you create hits the mark. I'll let you know how I've thought about these questions for my podcast, OTs and Pelvic Health. So, years ago, I started a Facebook group called OTs for Pelvic Health, which has grown to close to 4,000 members and is incredibly engaged. Each week, I go live in my Facebook group for something I call OT Empower Hour. Coming up this August, I have gone live in the Facebook group for 2 years on a weekly basis. We have over 95 different replays and over 70 hours of content. I'm still going to go live each week in my Facebook group. So why would I also start a podcast? Well, it boils down to a few reasons. I want to inspire new and seasoned OTs to pursue pelvic health. I want the ability to produce what I call foundational content that I think everyone who's new to this profession should know. And I want to make content that is easy to consume. So let's dive into each of these quickly. Inspire new and seasoned OTs to pursue pelvic health. I'm on a mission to train 10,000 OTs in pelvic health by 2030 and to certify over 3,000. My goal with this podcast is to inspire more OTs to consider pelvic health as their specialty. Of course, I'm biased, but I think that the most rewarding specialty for OT is truly pelvic health. Many OTs who eventually come to specialize in pelvic health tell me they wish they knew about this specialty years earlier. They often only find out about it if they themselves experience pelvic floor issues or if a loved one does. In fact, in many OT schools, the concept of OTs working in pelvic health is never discussed. Well, I want to change all that. Not only can OTs work in pelvic health, but I think we are the most uniquely qualified profession to work in pelvic health due to our biopsychosocial background. And my goal for this podcast is to show OTs exactly how this is possible, inspire them to take the leap, and provide a supportive environment where they're encouraged to keep going and growing in pelvic health. So the second reason, which was related to the first, is the ability to produce foundational content. With a podcast format, I can produce foundational content which answers all of the most frequently asked questions about being an OT in pelvic health. Things like how to get a job, what skills are needed, and how to overcome imposter syndrome, and how to develop your skills in different settings, things like what courses to take, what communities can we work with, etc. These are all topics for which I can produce a content library for which I can refer back to over and over again. For the first, for the person who is just discovering pelvic health, this is huge as it provides them with the ability to quickly get up to speed and to not feel lost. The third reason is that content is easy to consume. It can be so much easier to binge listen to a podcast episode than it is to watch replays of Facebook Live videos. If we want this profession to grow, we have to make this information easy to find, easy to consume, so we can get it into the hands of more and more ambitious OTs who can make a difference with our pelvic health clients. You can consume the podcast on your commute, while you're working out, going for a walk, etc. It's also easier for me to promote when I'm being interviewed, as the podcast is easily accessible to anyone versus a Facebook group. This makes it easier for someone who doesn't yet know they want to specialize in pelvic health to go in and check out the content without much commitment from their side versus, let's say, joining a Facebook group. And then after they listen to a few podcast episodes and they decide this is a specialty they want to explore more, well, then hopefully they'll join the Facebook group and my lives where I tend to go into more advanced topics. So those are my whys and my who for creating this podcast. If you're thinking about starting one, make sure to ask yourself the same questions, and the answers to those questions will directly impact what your topics are. So thanks for hanging out today. I'll see you tomorrow, where I cover all the equipment I'm using to produce this podcast. See you then.